Hi class, this video is to help walk you through the instructions for your argument paper. So I'm going to bring up the instructions and try to give you a sense of what I'm looking for, some do's and don'ts. Okay, so number one, your paper should be typed using 12-point font and double spacing. The required length is 6 pages, but again, I don't grade on length. This is approximate. Make the paper good. That's what I care about. If you go over, you're not going to be punished, right? The topic for the argumentative paper is as follows. Use the same topic as your logical vulnerability paper. So remember that logical vulnerability paper, that social issue, that thing that you were closed-minded about? You're going to use that topic. The catch is you must argue the other side of the issue in your paper. For instance, if you're like me and you find yourself being closed-minded about the death penalty in a way that makes it difficult for you to understand how any Christian could oppose it, then your assignment will be to write an argument paper denouncing the death penalty as immoral from a Christian perspective. So you've got to take the other side, do some research, gather some data, and make an argument supporting the other side of the argument. So I'm forcing you out of your comfort zone. Okay? Once you have taken a side, you should make a persuasive argument supporting your position. The most effective papers will use outside research as well as effective argumentation. You are also required to use at least one and no more than 2 of the argument strategies covered in class. So, in class we've covered inductive argument strategies like generalizations, analogy, causation. We've covered deductive strategies like conditional arguments, categorical arguments. You need to choose a primary argument strategy to make your case. It needs to be highlighted in the paper, right? I am using this argument strategy. That should be highlighted in your introduction, right? You can decide to make an argument using one strategy and like a major argument using one strategy and a minor argument using a second strategy, but no more than 2, okay? Because then the paper gets unruly. I prefer you to focus on one argument strategy. Be sure to avoid making logical fallacies. We've covered both formal and informal fallacies. If you make one in the paper, it's a big deal to me, right? Because you know them, so you know to avoid them. You also need to include a map. So you've given a map to me of your argument. You've already done this, but I want you to include it. So if you turn this in on Canvas, make sure that map is at the back of the paper. If you give me a hard copy, make sure that map is attached to the paper, okay? In total, the paper is worth 200 points, okay? Now, a few things. Remember to have a clear thesis statement in the first paragraph. The thesis statement is, in this paper, I intend to argue that the death penalty is immoral from a Christian perspective. Boom, clear thesis statement. The next 5 sentences of your intro, 4, 5, 6 sentences, should tell me how you plan to make the argument, right? So in this paper, I intend to argue that death penalty is immoral from a Christian perspective. I'm going to do this by looking at an article by C.S. Lewis titled X. In that article, Lewis argues that the death penalty is immoral because of X scripture or Y data, right? So in one paragraph, in that first paragraph, I want to know what you plan to argue, which is your thesis. I want to know how you plan to make that argument. Be specific, right? The more specific your thesis, the better. So you might say something like, in this paper, I'm going to argue the death penalty is immoral using Romans chapter 13 as my major source of argument. Making it specific or concrete, whatever, right? From a Christian perspective, that makes it more specific. You want to narrow the scope. After one paragraph, I have a clear sense of what you're going to argue in a specific way. I know how you plan to make the argument. What is your argument strategy? What inductive or deductive strategy will you use? What major articles will you use? What major data will you use? All of that is sort of outlined in a really neat package in the first paragraph. The first paragraph is vital. Spend a lot of time on it. It's the outline for your paper as a whole, right? The first paragraph outlines it. Okay, the thesis tells me what you're going to argue. The next 2 sentences tell me how you plan to make the argument. You are required to use 3 outside sources in addition to the stuff we read in class. You can use any style of citation, footnote, endnote, APA, MLA. I'm not picky. You have to choose a professional style, MLA, APA, Turabian, Chicago. You need to choose one and be consistent throughout. And as long as you do that, that's fine. So choose a citation style you're comfortable with, use it consistently. 3 outside sources. You need to use these substantively. And what I mean by that is students will make an argument, and then they'll say, oh, wait, I need 3 sources. So then you'll go into Wikipedia, you'll get on the internet, and you'll find some way to use a source to define a term, or you use it really peripherally. That's not how I want you to use your sources. I want the sources you use to be substantive to the argument you're making. Find articles that help you make your argument in concrete ways. So don't find sources that do the peripheral part of the argument. Find sources that help you with the real substance of the argument. If you use sources peripherally, you'll be dinged, okay? So make sure that you use them well. Let me give you some help informally, right? Some things to do and don't. Number 1, if you want an example of what a good intro paragraph looks like, I've put some example papers on Canvas. I call them exemplar papers. Look at those and look at the first paragraph in particular. I'm giving you examples of strong first paragraphs. The papers you're looking at are not the exact same assignment as you're being assigned. They're shorter papers for ethics, but they give you an idea of what an argument looks like, what a good argument looks like, how to support a conclusion, right? So those papers might help you, but predominantly they're going to help you with the introduction, how to get that first paragraph up and running. Often in these papers, students make one of 2 mistakes. 1, I never hear their voice. They give some report about Plato and what Plato thought about some issue, but I don't really hear their argument coming through. You need to make sure you're making an argument and that I hear your voice. The other problem that students often have in these papers is they try to give me too many arguments. So let's say you're going to write a paper about the death penalty. You end up giving me 5 arguments about the death penalty, each of them only 1 paragraph long. That is a bad argument. I want this paper to have 1 major argument that runs throughout, that chooses an argument strategy that we've covered in class, and that adds depth, so that I get 1 extended argument about the death penalty, using 1 argument strategy from the course, using sources for support. I don't want 5 arguments that all have 1 paragraph, that all have a different argument strategy, that are going here and there. I want a cohesive paper, focused, with depth. It's not easy, but with time, I know that you can do it. You might add a minor argument, a supplemental argument that uses a slightly different strategy. So you've got the major and then the minor, but I want no more than that, okay, within the paper. So problem number 1 is students don't really make an argument. They give me a report. Problem number 2 is students give me too many arguments. Often students get worried about length, and so you end up giving me Courier New. You put your name, date, sign, title of the course, title of the paper, and then you start page number 1 at the very bottom. Don't do that. It's so tacky. Just give me your name, start the paper, give me a title for it. I don't want binders or folders or anything like that. I've got to carry around 36 of these. I don't want them slipping around my back seat with a stack this big. I want black, white paper, black ink, stable in the corner, right? I want the introduction to outline the paper. It's not creative writing. I don't want the introduction to be like on a misty day. I woke up and looked out of my window. It's not that, right? This is making an argument. So start right up front with that intro paragraph. Students often don't use enough sources, or they use sources really peripherally. That's a problem. The key is to have a very clean, organized argument. 1 paragraph leads to the next. You insert some examples to maybe help, right, clarify a point. Documented examples are always better. So students want to use examples from their own life. My dad, my cousin, no. Strong arguments use documented, historical examples, right? So an example from the Ferguson situation in Missouri makes sense. That's a documented historical example. Use an example, my cousin got stopped by the police once and they were a jerk. That's not helpful. So you really want to make sure you use examples that are documented that can really support the paper. So a clean, focused argument strategy and argument. You can see how the points break down. I'm going to grade you strength of arguments can be worth 80 of the points. The argument strategy, which inductive or deductive strategy you're using, is worth 30. How well is the paper organized? How well does it flow? 30 points. Writing and grammar, make sure it's to the college level, right? Have someone proofread it. We've got academic services that'll look at your rough drafts and help you, right? So make sure that writing's there, 30 points. Proper citation, 10. Introduction, well-designed thesis, 20. I have created a rubric. This is also on Canvas, so the instructions are on Canvas, the rubric's on Canvas. The introduction's worth 20 points, and then you can see what an excellent one looks like, a good, adequate, sufficient. So this will help you know how I'm going to grade. So when I go through, I'm going to look at your intro, and then I'm going to either check one of these boxes, okay? So you want your intro to end up in this box. Organization's worth 30. Again, I'm going to give you some descriptions about what clear organization looks like. I'm going to check one of these boxes for your paper. Make sure you're getting checked over here, right? The argument strategy, inductive or deductive, is it clearly labeled? Do you use it well? Do you use the criteria of strength? So if you're using an analogy, what's the criteria of strength for analogy? Are you using that criteria of strength well, or are you using it poorly? If you're talking about a generalization, what are the criteria for generalizations? So you'll want to make sure you identify and also do a good job of applying the argument strategy. Strength of the argument, again, 80 points. How well do you actually make an argument? Do you avoid fallacies? Sources citation. If you don't cite any sources, technically what you're going to be doing is plagiarism, so you want to make sure that you cite them. You use a professional style. You use them substantively, not peripherally, etc. And then, of course, writing and grammar. Is it at the college level? And if it's not, get some help to raise it to the college level. I'm going to be going and checking these boxes that apply, and then as a result, you're going to be getting a grade. So this rubric is really important for you as you write your paper to look at, so you know what I expect. Again, go on to Canvas, look at the exemplar papers I post. That's going to help you with what I mean by an introduction, by good writing, and by a consistent, clean argument. I hope this is helpful. If you have any questions at all, please let me know. I want to be helpful, and good luck.